What's up, Prop Mob? I'm Eduardo, and this is Monster Tutorials. Today we have a really cool video. So a few videos ago, I made these bugs right here, these like caterpillars, right? See, does it get it to focus? Right, and they were made with latex that I put into a silicone mold that I found at Michael's. And it was a fun tutorial and all, but it wasn't fair to you guys because I found the mold on clearance and I could not find it anywhere else. And I like to put links for you to find it and be able to do what I just made. I could not find any more. I looked on eBay, Amazon, everywhere, even at Michael's, and they didn't have it anymore. So I started thinking, like, how do we do something similar, but something that everybody can do? So after going to Monster Camp, which is like a mask making camp that I went a few weeks ago. If you see my last 3 videos, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I learned how to make latex masks by sculpting with clay, then making a mold with plaster, and then pouring the latex in and pulling the mask. And I said I'm going to try that at a smaller scale and make one of these bugs. So today we're making this guy right here. That, if you recognize it, is a death's head hawk moth, which I like as a specimen for my area of specimens with all the other bugs and jars of creepy stuff, but also because it's from the movie Silence of the Lambs, which I absolutely love. So this was like a dual tutorial. It has a little bit of horror movie, suspense thriller, plus it also works well with my university specimen lab where I put all the weird stuff we make, right? So that's what we're doing today. So let's get started. For this first step, I'm going to just use some clay. This is regular pottery clay from Michael's, I believe, or from Hobby Lobby. It's from one of the two. What happened is I was looking for clay, but this thing weighs a ton, and I couldn't find some of the clay that we used at the camp around here. So I went and checked the closest one that was available locally, and it's this pottery clay. So I'm going to be using that. It comes in a huge heavy brick. See that? So we're going to need a little piece for the bug. I'm going to start with a piece that big. I think that's more than enough. Now, in terms of scale, what I did is I bought this butterfly wings at the dollar store. So just $1, and I measured it, and then I measured the proportions of a picture, right? So can you see that? I got that picture from Pinterest, which is my favorite image reference area. According to those proportions, I drew a sketch that tells me how long the abdomen needs to be and how wide, how big the thorax needs to be, the size of the head, and also the measurement of the wings. And they kind of match this, but loosely. So we're gonna have to trim these guys. So I'm going to start making the body based on these measurements that are based on this picture with those proportions. Now, I am not a sculptor, but we're going to try this. I'm going to start with making the 3 pieces in the general size according to my notes. We can adjust it later, so let's say that this is the head. And this guy is the thorax, and the abdomen is a little bit larger. I'm just going to press it there, and what we'll do is we'll sculpt it with some tools around it to give it the shape that we want. It needs to be a little bit bigger. Perfect. This is kind of like a circle. Let's put that right here and smush it a little. And the head. Right, that's the rough body of the moth. So now let's start shaping it with some tools. The first thing I'm going to do is start smoothing it out so it's nice and even. I'm not familiar with sculpting, so I'm just using this tool because it's flat on the back, and I think that'll work. We're going to put a texture on this, so this is just smoothing the general shape so it looks like the picture as close as possible. Don't forget that your most important tool for sculpting are your hands. That is looking pretty smooth. So the picture shows the moth is really fuzzy. It has fur all over from top to bottom except the tip of the head. So the fur on the abdomen like aims down, and the fur here on the thorax aims straight up. So we're going to do that with something like this. That is just a tool that came in my little cheap toolkit. And for the hairs on the thorax, we're just going to go straight down and get a texture in there all around. Now for the abdomen here, since they aim that way, we're going to put the little holes in an angle this way, because all this does is taking the space between the hairs away. And try to move your tool around so it doesn't leave patterns like these straight lines right here. Right, that's looking great. I put the little pattern on the head, thorax, and abdomen. I think we're good to move to the next step. I'm going to add 2 legs, and we're ready to make the mold. Right, 1 and 2. And let's blend them in with the same tool that does the pattern. Because on the pictures it looks like that part of the legs is also a little bit fuzzy. That looks great. Let's make the mold. For that, I'm going to make a box out of cardboard and glue it with hot glue so that it contains the plaster. The mold for this thing doesn't have to be heavy duty because it's tiny, right? It's not a whole mask, so I'm just using this old tray from a case of water. I'm just going to cut a strip of the cardboard out and make the wall around it. Let's do something like this. So leave a little room, so maybe like about a half an inch to an inch on each side. So there, and then it would turn and go up, okay, to about here. Turn there, right, and go right there. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to contain the plaster. All right. Okay, I'm putting this around it, even space all around, and we're going to seal it in with the hot glue. There is the box. It's nice and solid and it's sealed so that none of the plaster comes out the bottom. The next step, and the ideal thing is to get some Ultra Cal or some of the other specialty plasters, but I just went ahead to Michael's and got this guy for $8. So that's what we're going to use. And I'm going to use a little tray and some water. I'm gonna put water up to like maybe a half an inch because that mold is not that big. My water and plaster ratio, I do it by eye. And what I'll do is I'll start sprinkling some plaster in here until we get to a point where the plaster looks like a dry riverbed or a dry lake bed. That looks good. As you can see, there are some cracks forming, and that's what a dry lake bed would look like. I'm gonna let this sit here for 10 minutes. Hey Siri, set a timer for 10 minutes.
Your timer is set for 10 minutes.
We're ready to start mixing this. So I'm mixing it with my hands and letting it sit for 10 minutes. Make sure that the water is absorbed by all the plaster and you don't get any clumps. As you can see, there are no lumps or clumps or anything like that. So I'm going to take this chip brush, it's disposable, and I'm just going to brush it onto the bug. Let's see if I can adjust this angle so you can see it better. much better. So let's take this chip brush and very gently I'm going to brush it on the bug itself. But gently, and the idea is that we're capturing all this detail that we worked on. Okay, and don't brush it across because you'll just knock all the detail off. We're just trying to get some drops of plaster into all those little details. And by pushing it gently, you don't end up with big air bubbles. That looks great. Now I'm going to start just quite simply with my hands, scooping this and pouring it into the mold gently. That looks great. So now I'm just going to shake it just a little to settle it, and any bubbles rise up to the top. Now we let that set. It will take probably about, they say half hour, but I'm going to give it a good hour. And this will go through an exothermic process where it warms up and you'll feel the heat above on your hands as it's kicking in, and then it will harden, and then we get the clay out. So I'll see you in a little bit. Here we go. This has been sitting for actually a few hours because I went ahead and went to dinner, and now I came back and it's pretty solid. It's not super hard, but it's good. So we can like remove the mold. And there is our bug. Okay, now we're going to dig this out using some tools, but be careful not to mess up all the detail that we really worked hard to get. Basically what I'm doing now is just taking the clay and just pulling it out. We can throw this clay away. This is cheap clay, so. See that? And if it comes out that way, like that, then it leaves the detail perfectly and you don't have to be digging it out. Look at that. One piece, right? So this mold, we get the light on it so you can see where. See that mold? There is the detail that we worked on. So this is good. I'm going to take a very soft toothbrush, kind of like a children's toothbrush, and a little water to get the excess clay out of there. And I'm going to let this dry. We're doing this the cheap way, right? So we use the cheap plaster, the cheap clay and everything. So I'm using the cheap latex. Now, the problem with this latex, which I love, is that it's super liquid. So it has a ton of water and a ton of ammonia in it. With regular latex, I could pour it in here and it would dwell pretty well. It will make a nice skin, even with the mold still being moist. Okay, but since this is so wet, it's just saturated, we need this mold to be really dry. Okay, so I'm going to go and let this dry overnight. So I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow. Let it dry overnight next to the heating vent right here. And it'll be so dry that when we pour this liquid latex in there, this plaster is going to draw the moisture, the water and the ammonia out of there, and it will leave the rubber in the mold. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to let this dry thoroughly. Alright, see you tomorrow. Here's the mold. I let it dry all the way overnight. So I put it in front of a fan. This is ready to go. Like I said, make sure it's super dry if you're going to use the cheap liquid latex. I'm using just regular liquid latex, the kind they sell at Walmart during Halloween. It's cheap. Try to get all the air bubbles out and make sure that the latex goes all the way to the edge. We're going to let this sit for 2 hours. This is done dwelling. As you can see, it formed a nice thick skin around it. So I'm just going to pour this excess out. And now I'm going to let that latex there cure all the way. So we're going to leave it maybe a couple more hours. I'm going to put it upside down so it drips all the way out. While that liquid latex sets and gets nice and cured, let's open the wings. I am using these, it's a butterfly that they sell at the dollar store, so $1, and it's about the right size for this project. Comes like that, and it comes with a clip. So let's get it out of the clip. There you go. The wings are nice and fluffy because they're made from feathers, it appears. I don't know if they're real feathers or not, but we're going to be using the wings, and I'm going to also use those antennae. Okay, so let's cut these wings off. See if they come off easily. They seem to be just hot glued on there. Yep, there's one wing, 2 wings. And these antennae will clip them off, but I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to lose them. I'm going to leave this body laying somewhere around here. And for the wings, I'm going to use 2 pieces because the moth has 2 sets of wings. So I'm going to probably cut it in half. So I'm going to trace what the wings should look like. I'm using this guy as a reference as to the shape of the wing. So this wing is going to be like that. So it needs to be traced just to mimic that shape. So it looks like after it gets here, it turns in a straight line, right, all the way, and we can take this one maybe there. That works, and go in. All right, it looks perfect. Look at that. So we just have to trace that onto this other wing and cut it the same way. Perfect. Look at that. Now for the bottom ones, we're just going to mimic that shape as well. This is looking great. This latex is cured all the way, but it's super sticky. And this is quite nerve-wracking because we're going to remove it from the mold. So I'm taking some baby powder. This is just dollar store baby powder, I think. And we're just going to cover all that latex with the powder so it doesn't stick to itself. Let's do this. Just be gentle. And this formed a nice thick skin, so leaving it for 2 hours was pretty good for that type of liquid latex. And having the mold totally dry helped a ton too, because it absorbed the moisture right away. All right, you ready? Alright, so there is the moth body, and as you can see, if I can get this to focus, the hairs are there, everything's there. So we gotta trim this flashing. Look, even the legs came out pretty good. That's awesome. So let me trim this and we can start assembling it. There it is. There is the body. All right, let's get this painted and assembled with the wings, and that should be the last step. For his paint job, I'm going to use a little bit of black, not too much, and then an arrangement of browns and yellows, like this yellow ochre. So if we look at the reference picture, you see that it's a really dark brown. It's not, I wouldn't use all the way black, but we're going to use black and a little bit of brown. First thing I'm going to do is just paint the body all black, and then we'll lay the lighter colors on top of that. And what I'm going to do is to dab this And I'm keeping it a little bit dry so it doesn't fill the detail also, so it keeps that texture that looks like hairs or fur. Oh, look at that, it's preserving all that detail and it looks nice and fluffy. So let's let this dry and we'll start adding the lighter colors. While this dries, I'm going to take the wings and paint them in the same manner with the brown and the black. That's looking nice there. These wings are painted and they're drying. So now let's go back to the body. So according to the picture, it has some yellow stripes. So I'm going to imitate those using the yellow ochre. So I'm going to use yellow with a little bit of brown perhaps, so it's not so bright. Right, that looks good. So it starts right here. All right, that looks pretty good. So I'll do the same on the other side. And again, I'm dabbing it so it keeps that texture that looks like fur. That looks fantastic. Let's do the same on the other side. Look at that. That is so cool. Wow. All right. Now where the wings attach, it appears to be a little bit of yellow. So let's just get a little yellow here. And on the other side as well. And for the skull, it appears to be just a circle, and then it comes down with a T. Right, now once that dries, I'm going to put the two dots that represent the eyes on the skull. So this body looks like it's almost ready to let it dry and jump on the wings. All right, set that aside. It's squishy too, like a real bug. And we're going to get these guys, the little wings, and we are going to paint them, make them way lighter like the picture shows, right? So they're super light, that one and that one. So I'm going to lighten them up and then we're going to paint those two patterns. These top wings, I'm not sure what the technical name of it is, has just some splotches on it. Let's see if I can match the other wing with the same pattern. That's going to be challenging for sure. These guys are done. Now let's get these guys all nice and finished. These wings just have some brown coming across, two lines. That looks good. So that one goes there. So it goes kind of like this. While that dries, let's do the eyes of the skull here. And that's just two dots of black right there on the thorax. Ooh, and one thing I forgot to tell you is, while I was waiting for the paint to dry, I went ahead and poured another bunch of latex in the mold. And I can do, I think, 10 to 20 more bugs using this mold without losing too much detail. So you can have a whole swarm of moths or whatever it is that you make. So that's pretty cool. All you do is peel it off, finish it again, pour some more, and keep going. So that's the other advantage. This is dry and good to go. So I took the antennas of the little butterfly, right? So this was the head. That's the antenna right there, and I took them off. I'm going to glue them onto the legs and antenna of the moth. I'm going to let that sit there until it sets. I'm going to repeat it here, and the same for the two legs. We'll trim these to the right length once they are dry. And let's glue the wings too. That is perfect. I'm gonna let that set and do the other side. There it is. So I'm going to trim these. And the legs as well. Awesome. There you go. So now I'm just going to mount this. For that I have this little frame. This is from IKEA. It's called Hofstad. Right, and it was like $3 each. And it's like a little shadow box. It's a frame, but it's a shadow box. And I like these for mounting specimens. That part in there. Then on this backing, I have there's like a watercolor thing, and it happens to be the same exact size as the frame, and they're really thick, see? So we'll use one of these for mounting. I also have one of these vintage labels that I made a while ago, and I've been using the same labels on all my specimens, which gives them a uniform and consistent look. That's head moth. It's a hawk moth, but I don't have enough room to put it. That could go there, I suppose. And our moth can go perhaps right there. Right, let's see what this looks like. And there, you see it with the reflection, is our awesome Death's Head Hawk moth. I think this turned out pretty cool. If you like this video, this tutorial, give it a thumbs up, and if you like this kind of stuff, make sure to subscribe, because that's the kind of stuff we do here. Alright, so I'm Eduardo Talbert, you, me, all of us are the Prop Mob, and I'll see you next time.